for joining us for the Emerging Aviation Technology Working Group. This meeting is being recorded, just FYI. We will make the recording available at a future date. It should be posted on the Aviation YouTube channel at a future date, barring any technical difficulties, and there may be those. So please make sure that you're on mute unless you're ready to say something or ask a question. Feel free to use the chat function to ask questions, or just unmute yourself and ask a question. And without any further ado, Tim, are you available?
I am, Ray. Thank you.
All right, sir. Well, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. Feel free to jump right in.
Okay. So don't really have anything document-wise to share, you guys, but I did want to take a couple minutes here and do an update on the visit that we had from a delegation from Taiwan here 2 weeks ago. Give you a little bit
Tim,
of
sorry to interrupt. If you
Sure.
would just introduce yourself. I should have done a better job as introducing, but go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Oh, absolutely. So Tim Zimmerman. I'm with the Kansas Department of Commerce. I do a couple of roles for the department. I'm the regional director for the Northwest In-State Business Development, and I take care of some bond issue things and also cost benefit analysis. But the role that ties me to this group is I am the UAS-AAM Integration Project Manager for the state of Kansas for the Department of Commerce. With that kind of background, now I'll go back to explaining the details on our visit. So a little bit of information. On the 19th of March, our Deputy Secretary, Joshua Jefferson, and April Chain, she's the Assistant Director for International, had an industry meeting with the Taiwanese, about 150 drone supply chain leaders. After that, we successfully competed against Arizona, Virginia, and Oklahoma, and Kansas was chosen as a mission stop for the Taiwan supply chain delegation after the delegation attended the Select USA Summit in, I believe it was Washington, D.C. And then we were kind of in between that event and also Exponential in Houston. So the delegation included about 13 executives from some major high-tech companies in Taiwan. And they were here from, I think it was May 14th through the 16th. And these companies manufacture UAVs and their components, such as light sensors, battery, castings, and other parts, okay? What we did was they arrived in Kansas City on the 14th, and the ideal was to basically put our best foot forward to show that the assets were in Kansas are suitable for potential business expansions into the U.S. With that in mind, we actually treated them very well. They kind of had the red carpet treatment for the delegation, and we highlighted a lot of the strengths for advanced air mobility and demonstrated that Kansas is an ideal location for success in the U.S. and the global market. During their 2.5-day visit, they had a schedule. They actually met for an hour with the governor, the Governor Kelly, and then also Lieutenant Governor Tolan. After that meeting, they visited the DeSoto Panasonic plant, and then there was a group of us presented some information to them. One of them was the Kansas Department of Commerce, obviously, regarding the business incentives. Ray and Brian on the KDOT Aviation team went over AAM status and FAA connections, as well as we had some presentations from K-State, Salina, the Salina Airport authorities, and then Lucas from Kelly Hills regarding the test range. So I think we gave them a wide range of information, and I think it went over extremely well. After that, we arranged for the delegation to make some visits in Wichita. So they went through a tour of Spirit Aerosystems, NIAR, Wichita State, and a couple of small companies there. Then the delegation departed Kansas, but they had a very strong impression and a better understanding of what the state has to offer. And we're currently following up with them, and keeping the working group updated on any progress. We'll be glad to do that. One of the really good things that I want to point out about this is it was during the competition to be selected as a state. One of the pitch was that they recognized, or we let them know that we had a strong working group. Okay, and I think that was a very strong determining factor of them selecting Kansas. So, as a group, that's the power we have with all the different assets that we can offer and bring to the table. So that was kind of um, a wrap up, I guess, or a little overview of the visit. Ray, I didn't know if you have anything you'd like to add or.
I'm just appreciative that we were able to be part of the conversation. I think it was an amazing opportunity that was sparked by Commerce's international team. And I know she couldn't be here today, but I Tim mentioned April. She was instrumental in starting the conversation at last year's exponential or AUVSI that Tim's going to talk about for this year as well. But she started the conversation, she fostered the relationship, and I truly believe that she is the key person to make all of that happen, especially with that group, but also having a strong state of Kansas singular voice, us all at the table having a conversation and presenting, that what Kansas brings to the table. And all of the other states that are on the call right now, kind of plug up your ears. We're not talking to you right now. But, having that is something that is extremely valuable. It's something that we didn't necessarily have, in years past, or maybe not as well in years past, but it's a very strong connection. I'm not sure if anyone else that's on the call participated in that or not. I don't believe Lucas or K-State are here, but just a extremely positive outcome. And I think there's plenty of opportunities that will develop. Anyone that's on the call that has any drone connection or basically any supply chain, and I know that Roger's going to speak here in a minute, but anyone that has any interest in learning about supply chain or has any interest in learning about the group and seeing if there's any potential collaborative opportunity, please reach out to Commerce, or if you need help with the connection, you can reach out to me and I'll send you to their contact. But we definitely want to be able to foster that relationship and just stay on it and see how we can be able to nurture that even further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a perfect lead-in, Ray, to, last week's attendance to Exponential in Houston. Um, kind of kind of the same thing. And be honest, guys, this is my first time to go to Exponential, so I didn't have anything to really compare it to. But I've been to conventions before, and I know how that all works. I know Lucas kind of scouted out exp the exhibitor floor, ahead of time a little bit, and had a couple of targeted companies to maybe go talk to. So what we ended up doing, so it was Lucas with Kelly Hills, myself to represent Commerce. We had Brian with K. Aviation, and then Jonathan with the Greater Wichita Partnership was with us. Okay, there's four of us went around. And it was really unique, you guys, to see how when we walked up to some of these companies, we just started out, with a simple conversation. Are you looking to, expand your business to the United States? And, some of those foreign companies are going, you could just tell, yes, they really want to. But when you ask them what their plans are, they don't know. They don't know how to do that, right? So it worked out excellent for us because Lucas could give them the information about, hey, we do have a test range here, and we offer that service. We have the connections with the FAA, with the Beyond program and Assure. We have business incentives, and we have communities that are supportive of aviation and UAS and AAM type industries. So when we had that group going around, it made a very big impact on these people. In fact, we've already had one company from Korea reach out to us already. And I believe I just saw another email come through for an invite from another company. So there's already a little bit of some fruit kind of hanging there that I think we're going to go after and see if we can, bring these resources to Kansas. Um, that's kind of how it was. I'm kind of looking forward to next year. We're talking about possibly getting a group of us all together and doing a booth for Kansas. I think there's enough interest, in the state. I think we're going to have enough, what do you want to say, ammunition or tools in our tool belt to go after companies and put a great representation of Kansas out there. But I think it's going to be a collaborative, you know, venture. Not one organization is going to be able to do that. I saw, for example, Oklahoma had a very good presence there, right? But so they had Oklahoma, but then they had small little booths set up around their area there, just in there, and it was individual companies or organizations within the state. So, kind of like what we have, the working group, it'd be like us all being in our little cubes, you might say, and being able to uh, kind of work individually with companies or clients or whomever to attract them. So anyway, there's some details I think that we'll need to discuss in future meetings about this and see what kind of plans we can put together. But I really do think that that holds some strong potential for us as a state and as a working group here.
Absolutely. So a lot of our industry is there represented at that convention. Uh, Most of you on this call probably know what it is, but just in case, the Association for Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International, or AUVSI, hosts an annual autonomous vehicle convention. They move at different places around the country, and it covers anything from ground-based autonomy to maritime to UAS and AAM, and everything in between. So it's an amazing, if you have never been, you will be amazed at how big it is and how many vendors there are and all the amazing technology that's part of that, from systems, little components of components, to, full size, products. So it's amazing. We previously had a state display a couple of years ago, but our stakeholder partners started dwindling down. Um, and at that time, we didn't have anything, quote unquote, to offer from a state perspective. So we made the decision to pull back at that time. However, since then, we have an AAM roadmap that is currently in the works and will be available for public release in Q4 of this year. We have made a lot of connections and working together, and we're really strong as a state, working with our state stakeholder partners. And I think we'll definitely have something to offer next year. I know Doug Wood from Oklahoma is on the call. And I do love their display, but I want to beat them. I want to have a better display, Doug. So challenge is on. So hopefully next year we'll have, competing in a friendly way, competing, displays. But, AAM to me is not, I would love to see it strong within the state, but it's also a regional thing. So if we can grow our region, I think we'll be extremely well off. And that's why we have invited, state directors from, the surrounding states, because we do see this as a regional play. So thank you for giving that update. Looking forward to next year, looking forward to our partners that can have a state presence at the convention. Anyone that's interested in going and participating and contributing to that and being a part of Team Kansas, please reach out to Commerce or KDOT or one of our other partners, and we'll be able to get together and have that conversation. There's nothing else on AUVSI or the Taiwan delegation. We will move on. Mr. Powers, are you ready for your portion?
Sure, let me get my slides pulled up and then I'll show you my lovely face. Hold on a second. Okay, can you guys see my slides?
Not well. There we go.
Okay, I'll blow it up a little bit. Now, can you see that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. Again, I'm Roger Powers. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of what we're doing here in the state of Kansas. And I've enjoyed participating as a listener to these meetings, and a lot of good information comes out of them. So it's only helped us grow our understanding of Kansas assets and what's available. I'm a lifetime Kansas person. I live in the Wichita area, Augusta, Kansas, and I have a couple of companies. My background is I used to work at Boeing and IBM, and before that I was in the Air Force. But today we'd like to talk about how some of the Kansas partners in the state, and we want to grow that, including totally networking with this group where it's applicable. And I think the intersection is obvious to me, but there's some specific needs that are out there that are kind of driving our strategy, and that's the autonomous technologies. And I've got my own biases of what that means and how that impacts state workforce, our universities, and how it impacts our ability to attract companies. And then the supply chain security risk, which everybody is becoming painfully aware. And then one of the problems associated with a lot of, at least in the UAS space, is the commercialization. A lot of companies build a prototype, go through some federal grants and funding, and it's a really good product, but they don't know how to get it to market, and that's where it dies. So we're trying to address some of those issues. Let me go to the next chart here. So basically, just as a summary level, so you can kind of get the feel of what I'm going to talk about, the urgent need to address the statewide strategy, which Ray and his team are effectively doing. But I like to relate it to platforms and propulsion and autonomous systems, and systems integration of all those systems makes it a drone, whether it be a UAS, AAM of the future, obviously. But it continues to drive, how do we all work together? You know, Wichita has a deep aviation background. I used to be in it, and I guess I still am, because now I'm doing drones versus working for the big company. But basically, a lot of manufacturers build components, they build subsystems, they do a lot of work associated with business jets and, you know, obviously Spirit Aerosystems, those kinds of people. So there's a lot of interest of how do we get into the more advanced technology, especially with respect to UAS. The execution on a strategy, if we have one, would drive this cooperation and funding acceleration and the attraction of federal partnerships. So it only makes sense that we learn to figure out how to work together. Sometimes in the state, or even Oklahoma versus K-State, or Kansas, I like the way Ray put that. It's kind of like almost like co-opetition. And so we want to work together, but obviously there are interests and needs to look at those funding items themselves. The execution of this Kansas strategy, the messaging is important, and the marketing, how we do planning, our business planning, how we write proposals, how we execute on some of the grants that we are developing from both competitively and privately funded research, technology. All of that is important, that we have the right tools to work together. I believe that many private companies and universities have expressed an interest in securing a significant role in this strategy. And so I want to explore with you the highlights of that strategy and start to get, maybe not today, but begin a conversation of subject matter experts and industry leaders that are on this call and future, how we can make this even better and more integrated with what everybody else is trying to do, especially our government partners. Okay, now just one quick chart on my background. I run two companies. One is called Powers Engineering. That's growing, but basically that's a consulting company. And we do business planning, strategic planning. We can write large and manage large proposals, and we're often asked to go execute on programs. So we're like program managers. We build execution plans. Some of the recent customers to the right, obviously, is the Department of Commerce. We work with the NIST organization. We have worked with the University of North Dakota and was very instrumental in them achieving R1 status in their research portfolio. And we've recently and continue to work with the Rolls-Royce Corporation. And that one was basically helping them win the B-52 re-engine proposal, put a biz jet on a B-52. And that was a $3 billion win that Powers Engineering led. Flint Hill Solutions, you've probably heard of. It's a division of Powers Engineering, but we've been in the drone space for 20 years. We're pioneers here in the state of Kansas of developing some of the first drone assets. We didn't buy other people's drones. We actually had to develop some drones for the Kansas Adjutant General. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But just so you know, we don't sell drones. We're a research operation. We work primarily with the federal government through various research projects. Because of the research that we do, it does require us to develop a specific drone for a specific mission. And the results of that means that we have an autonomous system that's MIL standard 810 qualified, DO 178 software certified. So it's not a hobby autonomous system. It's a real system that's platform migratable. It can go across fixed wing helicopters, multi-rotors, and it can scale all the way up to a class 3 drone, which is like a 1,400-pound drone. Okay. And so it's the real thing. And that's what we do. We'll build the product and then demonstrate some type of capability that the government wanted to look at. And we're getting a lot of interest there recently because of the Defense Department and a lot of need to try to catch up with drone technology, especially small UAS drones and the use of those drones in defensive roles. Okay, there's a really long list of where the history of Kansas is. I'll be happy to share these slides, or you can look at them on the video. But what's really cool about this is we started in 2005. We partnered with K-State very early on at the request of the Kansas Adjutant General. Post Greensburg, he wanted us to build some type of drone capability in the state. So we partnered with K-State, kind of helped them stand up their UAS school. We got a lot of COAs. We worked at Smoky Hills extensively. And then in the background, we were developing our own autonomous system through that era. But then, everybody knows what happened. Starting in 2014, the DJI guys flooded the market. Public safety now has 95% DJI drones. And that's a serious problem now because they're slowly, very quickly even going away. If you look at 2018 or 2019, the National Defense Authorization Act banned the federal government from the procurement and operation of hostile country drones, including China. And then the recent FY25 NDAA signed by President Biden on 21 December started the clock of 1 year to determine once and for all if this is actually a national security risk to use those drones. And, here's a chart that talks about that rising threat assessment. So it's been building this threat and there's a lot of federal agencies that are out, obviously they have to ban it now, but very quickly over the last few years, figuring out that they need to come up with some type of alternative. So there's a lot of information on that chart. Section 162 of the FY 2025 NDAA basically says that you have to look, the evaluation of DJI drones has to be evaluated all the way down to the component level. And obviously there's a Blue UAS program to go through that audit. But if the DJI drone poses an unacceptable risk to the national security or its population, they have to determine that in 1 year. If DoD does not make that determination, in other words, if that government entity doesn't do anything per the legislation, no additional congressional legislation is required, and the drone will be absolutely prohibited in the United States. Interesting enough, Kansas Senate Bill 9 is now law, which says that government agencies are banned from purchasing new drones or components from countries of concern. They list the countries of concern as effective July 1st. while allowing the continued use of the existing drones they have. But we're all got our eyes on the NDAA 1-year clock. Again, I like to think about this when I'm going to talk about strategy. I like to think about the platform piece. And when we look around the state and look at who's the leader in platform development, building an aircraft, I mean, that Cessna, Beech, now Textron, leaders, absolute leaders. They're also systems integrators, and NIAR is a leader in testing, and every aircraft that's ever been built has probably went through NIAR's some way of testing some component or structural piece of that. So I think Kansas has a big play to that. Maybe not so much in the small drone business, because they're in hundreds of thousands of smaller drones versus hundreds of larger aircraft per year. But systems integration is an important key element when respect to the propulsion system. The integration of a propulsion system onto an aircraft and the actual development of propulsion system is not something Kansas does. Now, GE, Pratt & Whitney, Rolls-Royce, we buy those systems, rightfully so. But the integration onto platforms is definitely something that's not easy to do. And Spirit builds the nacelle and struts associated with commercial aviation. But the propulsion system in the UAS space is a serious supply chain risk, because most of the motors are built in China or maybe Taiwan and Japan, but at different volumes. And as you learned at AVSI, probably like I did, the high power or the high quality magnets that are in these electric motors for our drones all come from China. There's some less quality magnets that from other places, but China just has that market. So there's a huge problem there. The autonomous systems adaptable to any platform is unique, and I think that's a critical thing to talk about, because in order to have an FAA waiverable, at least if they know what they're waivering, to do exotic missions in the National Airspace System, the last thing you want to be doing is doing that with a hobby grade or some type of system that's not been really vetted. So, but the autonomous system that can go to any platform would be a really good research and development asset for the state if we're going to actually develop drones to replace the DJI drone. So that's, now you're starting hopefully to understand a little bit of what we're going to do. So this is an autonomous system that we put together, which basically can go to any platform. It's absolute precise simulation and navigation capability, and exotic missions like a GPS denied environment for a defense use, to use a visual navigation system and to fly a portal for like 20 miles without GPS, and then to have that repeatable opportunity to fly that same portal. That technology exists, but you have to, it's just come out, but you basically have to be able to integrate that into a system and be able to go and demonstrate that in the future. So that's the kind of system that we think is a key at Kansas asset. Not to distract you too much, but part of this trying to work with Kansas partners, there is now a Kansas Crewed and Uncrewed Aerial Systems Association. I like the acronym KCUASA, right? How you remember that. There are members already of the association, K-State, Wichita State, Fire Point Organization, other industry players have joined. What the mission is to, in parallel with what we're doing here with Tim and Ray and Brian, is to advocate for Kansas partners promoting our core competencies in the state, to build on our government relationships. And we all have different relationships at the federal level, state level, and the local level. These are all very important. We want to develop our state, federal, and commercially funded opportunities. So we have a strategic goal of 2,500. That's $100 million in new expenditures and 2,500 new jobs in 2030. I believe, based on the forecast and the opportunities we're looking at and already have won, we're gonna blow through that goal. So that's always fun. I always like to set a goal and see how we can exceed that goal. But the initial focus of the association is to look at public safety and defense as well. And dual use is a very important thing to consider. For instance, a public safety mission could include an ag drone that can be fire suppression. The endurance requirements, the environmental requirements, the mission specific will determine the platform, the propulsion, but the autonomous system should obviously be available to be integrated onto that. And we know that it's a safe system. So those are our initial focus because there's a lot of customer pull there. And I think we're going to create jobs. Our research portfolio is going to grow at our universities. And basically, I believe this is a higher education transformation. I believe the transformation is already in motion. Areas of focus is not to say, hey, I'm in the drone business or I build this, but basically, my experience and the way we're looking at this is focus areas are based upon, and where funding comes from the federal government, from grants that are solicited, or you develop the opportunity yourself because maybe the idea is not even known. But our focus areas are core competencies of NAS integration and airspace development. That's definitely a K-State core competency. And I'm using K-State because I bleed purple, but I apologize. Systems integration is a big deal. That ought to be a core focus for the state. Technology incubation and simulation. If we're going to develop next generation drones, for example, the subject matter experts, the large public safety agencies like Texas that has 25,000 DJI drones about ready to be grounded, for heaven's sake, they're going to want to come in and get interviewed about their future missions or what they're doing today with their drones. And we'll want to take that technology, integrate it, and simulate that use case so we can determine if that's an effective drone that we want to rapidly prototype, test in our airspace, wherever those airspaces are. We've used Smoky Hills extensively, Crisis City, Blanket COAs, or Kelly has an airspace that could be absolutely used for these kinds of test cases where they're fairly experimental, and we need to have a more controlled environment and understand what we're doing. So yeah, those are some focus areas that drive funding. If you look at the 5-year look at, it's basically in 3 phases. Phase 1's already started. I'm going to talk about a purple UAS. That's a $1 million grant that was developed and funded by our Kansas legislature, and it's a critical component of the larger DJI drone replacement program that's happening. But purple UAS is a good first step, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But basically, we're looking at operational scenarios where we've already got some research that we need to conduct regarding the UAS space. And the reason why we say AAM as well is because we believe that the next generation platform is being developed by AAM, especially class 3 and above. The remote system, the remote pilot part of an AAM, like WISC is doing or China's already doing, that may be the future, but we need to be able to be prepared to train and develop a pilotless AAM or flying taxi as part of this strategy. And so they're intersecting technologies. We want to have IOC of some systems integration labs and some simulator labs and some real test demonstration and pilot credentialing areas to fly by 2027, 2028. And that funding is in motion, we hope. And in 2030, we want to get to full commercialization of some of the prototypes that we've gone through this process. But again, all 3 of these phases, they continue for forever. They just get started and get phased in the sequence you see on this chart. So I've already talked about these phase 1 initiatives a little bit, but we do have a public safety initiative focused on public safety through the Department of Commerce that's laser focused on replacing the Chinese drone, working with Firepoint and their relationship with Defense Innovation Unit. They are they're involved with looking at advanced drone technology that's going to support the Defense Department. And then the Purple UAS is basically addressing a national security problem with respect to components and cybersecurity vulnerabilities associated with the drone technology, whether they be of foreign adversary content or not. The so what is basically these technologies related to the platforms and the propulsion and the autonomous systems are foundational to Kansas' future. I give you one quick example. My experience at Boeing. When I was at Boeing, I was in charge of all the R&D in Boeing Wichita, and that we had 3 very large buildings on South Oliver. They're still there, but they're vacant. Very modern laboratories. We touched every military aircraft that Boeing ever built, commercial aircraft, simulators, systems integration labs, and we had 25,000 employees. When Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, the business model changed, and a lot of those technology labs left Wichita, and then Boeing Wichita closed. So that foundational infrastructure is what I'm focused on with the state, because I think we have this, we have the partners to implement these things, and the opportunity is right in front of us to take advantage of it. Purple UAS, let me give you a brief outline of what that is. You probably learned a lot about blue UAS and green UAS at AUVSI if you went there. If you want to sell your drone to Department of Defense, you have to go through blue. And blue is developed and put together because of the NDAA ban and the need to audit the supply chain security of a drone that's going to be in the Department of Defense. And I've been involved with Blue for several years, working with the Department of Commerce. We have audited Blue. We know Blue in spades. We know its pluses and minuses. Their mission is pure, but their process is not very good for small businesses. It's very expensive. It's very burdensome. And so a lot of entrepreneurial drone companies, they avoid going through Blue. They avoid doing business with DoD because they don't have the money or the resources to go through that process. And Green has also stood up for a similar kind of paralleling what Blue is doing. Purple is different. So Purple is part of the Department of Commerce larger program. Kansas is starting the program with a grant from the Kansas legislature. And basically, Wichita State Firepoint is going to be the blue storehouse of knowledge for the state. And they are going to be subject matter experts. So they're going to continually have relationships with Blue. They already have the relationship with the director of Blue, and they understand DIU. That's their key partner. And so they're going to become that expert for Blue. And they could even support small businesses going through Blue. But more importantly, Purple UAS is focused on public safety. And Purple UAS is going to be established at K-State Salina. So yay for them. That's why it's called Purple. And if KU is on the line, I'm very, very sorry about that. But Purple is going to do things that are different than what Blue is doing. For instance, from a perspective of supply chain security, yes, they're gonna look at that and audit. If you want to sell a drone to public safety, yeah, you're going to need to go through Blue. So think of this: all 50 states, all the public entities in the United States are going to fly to Kansas, and they're going to go through a supply chain security, cyber security check, and a mission effectiveness test. And that is the drone that let's say a small business wants to sell to public safety, they can come in and get audited, and they can come in and fly their drone in our airspace and get this certification. And in addition to that, they can also get pilot credentialing and learn how to fly, and basically learn how to fly the drone to what we call NIST standards. And NIST has the oldest federal agency in America, has the standards and the apparatus and the indoor and outdoor test capabilities for drone credentialing and flying. And so they're going to keep that fresh, and those standards are going to be implemented at K-State, and K-State is going to be able to certify those drones. So that's what the Purple program is. It begins very soon in a month or so, and so we're very excited to get started. I can say this, I am flying out to meet with the Department of Commerce, the Federal Department of Commerce, next week, and their Purple is a core component to their federal program, and so they're very excited to be working with Kansas, and they see Kansas as very, very serious about getting by having their own Kansas resources to kind of get smart and get started ahead of the curve, because it is a national emergency with respect to a drone technology, especially for public safety. So in summary, there's a lot of business and strategic planning ongoing. We're looking at some of the ideas being created by our partners, and we're basically positioning those through business development opportunities. We're already responding to requests for information and requests for proposals from our federal partners on a lot of programs that are now under review. And association members are sought to share in this vision and join. And one of the benefits of being an association member is you'll learn a lot about the details of what's going on. But if you have a specific core technology that maybe doesn't fit in some of the areas that we're in, we're definitely willing to share with you how to capture grants. I believe they're grant experts. They know how to go get the resources, and that's what it's all about, is how do we develop these opportunities. But the whole point is to try to keep the jobs or grow the jobs in the state. So thank you for your time. I hope I didn't go too far over. And if you have any questions now or later, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Any questions for Roger?
Hey, Roger, this is Devin Patterson here. Great to meet you. I would love to connect with you and just pick your brain about what would be the best way to build out that strategy over the next 6 months. I reached out to you on LinkedIn, so just feel free to accept the connection and we can build some rapport there.
Okay, Devin, I'll look for your link. Thank you so much for that. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Thank you.
Tim, you failed. So Tim Zimmerman was supposed to introduce Devin. Devin, I didn't know you were going to make this meeting. So
I didn't know he was on there either.
And I forgot to remind you, Tim. So
Yeah.
Before we move on to the last presentation, Devin, do you want to take a real quick minute to introduce yourself, please?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So great to meet everyone. My name is Devin Patterson. I'll be coming on and joining the Kansas Department of Commerce as the Director of Aviation and Aerospace Industry Development for the state. So a lot of what you're mentioning, Roger, in terms of building out what that strategy is going to look like and aligning the state with federal initiatives is going to be my charter over these next couple of months. And so I look forward to getting to know you all and working with you all and building out a viable strategy for Kansas.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that. We definitely will be talking to you very soon. Thank you.
All right, welcome aboard, Devin, and looking forward to working with you. Next up, MITRE Corporation. Trevor, if you would just give us a very quick kind of a recap of what we're doing statewide for the Advanced Air Mobility Roadmap, market analysis, economic impact study, and then go into some of your recent findings regarding what other states are doing to, as far as enabling governance and legislation, please.
Sure. Yep. Trevor Lynn, so project lead with the Kansas Department of Transportation strategic plan for AAM. I also have Michael Gutierrez on the line that is supporting the project as well. So we've been working in the background, sort of silently, sort of not silently. I think we've engaged a lot of you individually over the course of the last couple of months to get data and get input for the roadmap. So we've been chugging along on that. Probably 90% there. Just sent a bunch of material and pages that KDOT has been going through. So looking forward to present sort of final product on that. As far as the roadmap goes, it was interesting to see your presentation there, Rogers. I think there's a lot of alignment sort of at the implementation level with where we have taken the roadmap specifically on the priorities that we established, the objectives we established, and also the activities that we've mapped out. So interesting to see sort of that alignment from a different direction, bottoms up approach. We'll definitely want your input once you get to see the roadmap. So as far as activities on the roadmap, I'd say the roadmap itself is probably 99% done right now. Last couple of months, we've just been focused on doing the EIS portion and the market analysis portion. For the market analysis portion, we're looking at a use case approach. So we're looking at emergency response, looking at air ambulance, looking at cargo operations, passenger transportation, and also agricultural operations. And then we're taking that market analysis and running it through an EIS approach with REMI modeling to sort of see what the total state impact would be sort of as these use cases are realized. And we're also looking at maintenance opportunities, production opportunities from an aircraft perspective, and MRO opportunities as well. So we expect to have some pretty substantial state impact numbers from the CIS approach and the market analysis. So that activity, I think, should wrap up probably within the next couple of weeks. And then we'll be working with KDOT to sort of refine the final paper product deliverable and probably go through a couple of round of comments and get everyone's feedback and sort of have the plan to have that done probably by the end of June. And we'll probably do a sort of in-depth overview presentation with you all in the near future here. As far as today, though, I wanted to kind of jump into maybe down in the weeds part of the deliverable that we sent over to Ray for the roadmap specifically is looking at what are the other states doing? What are the activities as far as legislation goes? We have a specific priority within the roadmap here focused on enabling operations. And part of that is really focused on how the state is preparing from a strategic perspective for planning and regulatory support, really, to establish efficient and effective governance as a key objective for that priority. So we can see kind of looking at the other states in the ecosystem that they're establishing for AAM, this is probably one of their objectives as well. And there's definitely some common themes that we're seeing. They're taking a proactive approach to both getting the funding in place and the planning and the position within the state, whether that's the DOT or Commerce or some other department that's getting set up, sort of interagency to prepare for AAM. So the common themes that we're seeing across the states are legislation to formalize how they're going to fund AAM initiatives, sort of this DOT-led strategic transportation planning, where they're establishing maybe a point of contact within the DOT or agencies within the DOT, or like I said, a public-private partnership that is working between the agencies. We're also seeing legislation that's getting put in place for infrastructure and research incentives. That's really looking at how are you planning for vertiports? Is there any preemption that the state wants to establish so that we don't have local zoning considerations or issues as cities begin to sort of undertake planning for infrastructure? Looking at sort of the airport system planning perspective, where we're assessing airport electrification and also assessing how the state is going to either run, fund, or encourage these service providers, which are expected to provide these third-party services like surveillance and communications and effectively operate the UTM network for AAM. In addition, there's workforce and training and education themes that are definitely transparent throughout these legislations, public-private partnerships that are getting established, as well as economic incentives where we're looking at potential tax breaks or other commerce incentives that are really meant to drive either manufacturing investment, production investment, or investment from other consultants related to AAM. So as far as the key themes, I think that are popping up, a lot of this is probably driven by some of the AUVSI recommendations that were put out. There was a study, UAM committee, that was put together to sort of assess where the states should focus their efforts for recommendations on legislation. One of that is the state investments. So looking at how the state could potentially establish innovation investment funds identify federal grant opportunities, develop those private partnerships. The second being development of a skilled workforce. So looking at establishing centers for AAM research, specifically at state universities or research centers, identifying job training opportunities, and really focusing on job growth incentives and collaboration between those educational institutions and sort of the state agencies that are leading AAM. A third theme that AVSI recommended and we see popping up in this legislation is establishment of a single or group of AAM coordinators. That's where we're having that state agency. Sometimes it's getting championed by the governor's office, sometimes it's getting championed by Commerce, sometimes DOT, where there's a critical group or critical person that is the single point of AAM establishment in the state. Also seeing outreach and local community initiatives where there's sort of funding or point of contacts identified at the local level to both drive constituent communication and also act as a point of contact for sort of that local concern for state consideration. And then the final one is that proactive infrastructure construction, really focused around charging infrastructure and assessing sort of the feasibility of establishing vertiports within the airport system. In addition to that, I think there's legislation really focused around defining the terms for what AAM, eVTOL, powered lift, vertiport, et cetera, is, and that's very important, both from a state law perspective and especially for states that are potentially doing aircraft registration or aircraft taxes, where they are essentially trying to deal with a new form of aviation. So these term definitions are very important in the legislation as well. In addition to that, there's definitely a theme where there is an ask either from the governor or this PPP body to establish a statewide plan or statewide strategy with subject matter expertise sort of across the state, where they're identifying specific universities, specific companies, specific industry members, and specific agencies to come together, similar to what we're doing through the working group here to build this statewide plan. Another big one, which I hit on earlier, is this preemption over local AAM ordinances. There's definitely been a push from cities, both on the US side and both on the AM side, to get ahead of what it looks like to have a vertiport in their city. So states are sort of picking up on that and putting out legislation that says, hey, the state is going to provide guidance on this, provide education material on this, and establish that preemption. And last but not least is defining what an AAM aircraft is as far as performance applicability. So as a new flavor of potentially autonomous systems, we need to be able to differentiate between UAS and AAM, whether that's by weight, performance characteristics, or what are some of those terms that are coming into legislation. So you can kind of see these themes come together in Texas House Bill 3134, which was just approved in the House. Essentially, what that legislation does is sort of hit on all these key AUVSI recommendations tailored to the state perspective. And there's also some efforts that I'll go through here with other states that are doing the same thing with their own state flavor. So kind of kicking off here with Florida. In 2023, Florida convened an AA working group. That's an ongoing working group. They've also just recently been participating in the NLC, which is the National League of Cities AM Advisory Forum. Wichita also is part of that forum and helping lead that, which is great, I think. But Florida has definitely been, in this AAM planning phase since the early 2020s. Their first piece of major legislation was passed in the Senate this year, May 2025. Many of the same elements from that AUVSI model legislation are covered by that. They've also identified the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority as the designated Florida's AAM test site. So they're looking at sort of the resources that are in the state and designating industry consortiums as sort of that single point of contact, and also inventorying the types of resources and infrastructure assets they have that could be leveraged for those early AAM operations. MCO, Orlando International Airport, was identified as a potential future site for a vertiport. They've set sort of this operational target to have a vertiport both built and operational with early AAM aircraft by 2028. And they've also been working on sort of expanding their electric charging network across the Florida airport system with Beta. Kind of jumping over a little bit across the Gulf here, we have Texas. So Texas convenes advisory committees, both from the North Texas Emerging Entrants Integration Committee and from the Texas DOT, similar to what Ray has put together here with the working group, both formal and informal working groups that are sort of driving the requirements for potential legislation and helping industry stakeholders coordinate on what issues the state is facing. So HB 3134 was put through in May 2025. Again, big highlights from this is addressing preemption, also establishing R&D innovation funds. So that's looking at how the state can both use federal funds and help match university funds through this R&D program for AAM, and also establishes a formal AAM office. Texas also lucked out being identified as the new Center for Advanced Aviation Technologies, the CAT, through NFA reauthorization as of this year. So Texas A&M is going to lead that. There's probably going to be a large, effort for research in AAM once that gets formally going. They've also identified as an innovation zone. It's essentially a testing hub for AAM technologies that's driven by a informal PPP, public-private partnership, and they partnered with industry like Whisk-Arrow, where they're trying to operationalize a concept for autonomous air taxis with the city of Sugar Land and the greater Houston region. Hop over to Oklahoma, which is on the call. Hey, Doug. So let me know if I get any of this wrong. But ODA has designated a state clearinghouse for AAM. They have a AAM and UAS manager that's been identified, published the AAM strategy recently as well. 2 pieces. Yep. Good job. Congratulations. And Senate Bill 773 and Senate Bill 1912 authorizes ODA to integrate vertiports into the airport system and the aerospace infrastructure, and 773 establishes a revolving fund to sort of address how that infrastructure investment will look like, and also support early pilot programs for the infrastructure. As far as the key industry activities, they're partnered with Vigilant Aerospace to deploy an airspace management system that's capable of widespread BD loss flight, and have numerous R&D centers focused on advancing UAS and AM, particularly in the defense space. Anything to add there, Doug? Since I don't have slides, it's open conversation.
No, most of that funding, we got $2 million the first 2 years, and we got another 500,000 added to that this year. And so we've got several projects going around the state that we're dedicating that funding to.
And hopping up a little bit to Ohio. So Ohio is sort of looked at as an early leader for AAM. They've been at this a while, similar to Florida, commissioned multiple studies, really looking at the implementation of AAM in Ohio. So past sort of the strategic roadmap, how is the state going to address it? Also released an economic impact report for the state. They have signed House Bill 54, which creates a designated AAM division within the DOT, establishes a new AAM director, and also establishes responsibility to set up a state-based air traffic management system. So we're kind of getting into the flavor of the state running or potentially supporting directly one of those third-party services that we're expecting to enable AAM. Industry activities sort of all across the board. I think the big one is the manufacturing facility that Joby has been working on to establish a hub up there. Also have the National Advanced Air Mobility Center of Excellence to sort of lead and act as the clearinghouse for advancement in the state as a designated entity. Other notable states I'll sort of hit on and run through quick here. So Maryland also recently kicked off an executive order this year, 2025, to create an AAM council with the sole purpose of coming back to the governor's office and figuring out how to set up a roadmap and strategic plan for the state. This is composed of top state officials, industry representatives, and essentially a PPP approach. North Carolina NCDOT, they formed the University Transportation Center of Excellence. That's really focused on bringing the top research universities together, driven by state funding, around $2 million in state funding, and also supported through a not-for-profit that was established specifically to set up the ecosystem for UASNA in the state. About $5 million has been used for that. Virginia also created an AAM strategic plan for the state. They have set aside around $200,000 per public use airport to figure out how to do three-phase power equipage and assess their broadband feasibility for AAM. This is the state grant, state match funding, 95% through the state, 80% through the airport. Also established a state budget to assess an AAM test site establishment at around $1 million. Utah's taken a PPP approach as well, where they've set up through the governor's office Project Alta that's led by 47G. Essentially, it's a coalition across multiple state agencies and industry members and universities, where they're working through the DOT and this coalition to fund numerous research studies and sort of act on some of the DOT-led implementation studies that have came out. And last but not least, Washington DOT has sort of published a vertiport land use guide supplement focused on local concerns and planning for city planners. They've also planned to release a formal AAM implementation plan in June of this year and allocated around 10% of their AIP funds to focus on AAM and sustainable aviation initiatives. So as you can see, it's kind of a mixed bag of approaches on how states are approaching legislation, how they're forming these working groups, how they're formalizing the approach to implement AAM, and also how they're funding these initiatives. Kind of across the board, progress is very, very broad. There's many states that are sort of in the same boat of Kansas, where we're starting to form strategic working groups and a strategic plan and really build the framework for what it's going to look like to do AAM implementation. A couple states where they're a little bit ahead and they've progressed from that and decided that now's the time to draft legislation and establish funding and figure out how to do this in early stages with airports that are willing to take the risk. So broad 60,000 foot view, there's been about 28 state bills that have been signed into law across 13 states the last couple of years. Almost all of these bills contain terms and hit on some of those key topics that we talked about for advanced air mobility and vertiports. And there's been about 15 bills that have been introduced in at least one of the chambers, but has not been signed into law yet. That will probably mirror some of the key topic areas that both AUVSI has recommended and some of the state working groups have come up with.
Thank you, Trevor.
Yeah, no worries.
Appreciate that. And all of this information will be in the roadmap that will come out a little bit later. So components of that roadmap and MITRE will reach out to those agencies and partners that have contributed to get input on their contribution as well. But if there are any questions or anything, please let us know. You will, again, get the, or this meeting will be recorded, will be posted on our YouTube channel within the next few days. So that's a great way to get those resources. If you want to email or get contact information from anyone that participated in this call, please feel free to reach out to me or feel free to reach out to our sister agency at Commerce, and we'll be more than happy to put you in touch with those individuals. Any questions before we let you all go? Our next meeting is on June the 26th, tentatively scheduled 3 to 4 p.m. So look for meeting information on that. If you have any meeting topics, please make those suggestions, send those over to me, or again, any one of our partners as well. I'd be more than happy to try to put that on the agenda. Otherwise, if there are no questions, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.